Hey, if you're enjoying this show, consider supporting us on our Patreon. You can get cool perks like access to these episodes a week before they go public, and you can pick an album for us to review. Any support is greatly appreciated, so if you feel inclined, go to patreon.com/polyphonicpress.
You're listening to Polyphonic Press, a podcast for music lovers. Join your hosts, Jeremy Boyd and John Van Dyke, as they take a deep dive into a classic album and analyze it track by track.
Hey, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
And I'm John Van Dyke.
And basically, if you don't know how the show works, we have no idea what album we're going to be listening to. We have an album generator that we pick the albums from, so we're going to hit the button and see what album we're going to be listening to this week. And the album we're going to be listening to is Richard and Linda Thompson, I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight. Okay.
Yeah, I can't say I'm familiar either.
Thompson. Okay, so let's figure out who these people are. So Linda Thompson is one of the most recognized names and voices in the British folk rock movement of the 1970s and 1980s, in collaboration with fellow British folk rock musician guitarist Richard Thompson, to whom she was married for 10 years, and later as a solo artist. Born in Hackney, London, she moved with her family to her mother's home of Glasgow, Scotland. Okay, so she's a British folk singer and this album is with her husband. I guess it's the name of the album. I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight.
I'm guessing they're one of those acts that was big in the UK, but didn't quite make it across the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of artists like that.
So this is their second album, the second album released by Richard Thompson, their first album together. So I don't know who Richard Thompson is. Who's Richard Thompson? Okay, so he was in a band called Fairport Convention.
Oh, I've heard of them. Okay.
The Bunch.
Not familiar with them.
Yeah, I have no idea about this album. We'll learn a little bit more as we go through. But so what's the background of that? After the marked lack of success achieved by his first album, Henry the Human Fly, British singer, songwriter, and guitarist Richard Thompson started a personal and professional relationship with Linda Peters, a session singer. I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight was the first album by the duo of Richard and Linda Thompson. Sessions for the album took place in the spring of 1973 at the Sound Technique studio in Chelsea, London. The house engineer John Wood co-producing the album with Richard Thompson, where his first album was treated harshly by the critics. The second was eventually hailed as a masterpiece, and it is now regarded as a classic of English folk rock and one of the Thompsons' finest achievements. Okay, so the first song on the album is called When I Get to the Border. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. So far so good.
I liked the all the different solos in there. And they were short, but there was a lot of them, and all the instruments were kind of like trading off.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, it was, I noticed it was mostly between the guitar and the, I guess it was an accordion or something like that.
Mm-hmm. But there were also some flutes in there. And
yeah, there was some other stuff going on in there too. But each solo seemed to have its own character to it.
Yeah.
That was kind of neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting blend of. I mean, you totally call it folk rock because it's like it's got a very British folk air to it, but it's also got a certain 1970s rock thing to it. It's not a hard rock thing, but it's got that. What would you call it? I mean, you would call it like a folk rock, but it's not. It's not like the Byrds or anything like that. It's something. It's more like.
It's really more like the Flying Burrito Brothers.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, okay.
Like that country rock kind of thing. Because there was, even though it's British, I think there was some hints of country in there.
Yeah, maybe like the later Byrds. Maybe I could sort of hear that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it. I don't know. There was also it was also very British. I could see there were some elements that would work as a soundtrack to like a movie set in medieval times or something like that. Just not necessarily some of the rhythms, I guess, and some of the melodies.
Yes,
Well,
a lot of the British folk sort of sound is very old. It hasn't changed much in literally hundreds of years. So almost 1,000 years actually. It's definitely got its unique sort of sound, but it's like it's instantly identifiable when you hear it. It's just like, oh yeah. But of course you hear a lot like you think of like stuff from like the East Coast of Canada anyway. And it's very definitely inspired by that because it originally would have come from that area. So yeah.
It's interesting. I'm curious about the rest of the album. So let's get on to the second song, which is called The Calvary Cross. I was expecting that song to be a lot longer. I don't know why. I was thinking it should go on for at least a few more minutes.
Yeah, it's almost 4 minutes long already.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those songs that actually had a little bit more life in it. I think maybe if it had like a chorus in it or something like that, it would make it. I think it sort of needed that, but it's pretty decent. The fact that it didn't feel long enough at almost 4 minutes is sort of neat. I love the guitar intro.
Yeah,
I thought that was
really cool. And maybe that's partly why I thought it was going to go on longer because that was like the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then the song was slow to get going, and then it just had this sort of laid back kind of feel that it felt like it should be given the space to it just feels incomplete to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it felt a little bit incomplete, but it's not fatally so.
No.
It's still pretty decent. I mean, it's not the sort of song that I expect to be a single on there. But yeah, it's a decent track for something that feels a little incomplete and yet not long enough.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
Yeah, exactly. The song itself, it's weird. It doesn't sound like something from the 70s. I don't know. It sounds like something much later than that. Like something from, I don't know. It doesn't sound like it has a time period.
Yeah, it's a kind of a timeless sound. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not something you point to and say, "Oh, that's very 70s."
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you live in Britain and you're aware of this song because you heard it back in the 70s.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, for us hearing it for the first time, it could have been released anything, maybe not. Well, in some circles, I think it could be released today. But I would say anywhere between, the 70s and the 90s, it would stand up.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think of a band like, I don't know. I think the Wallflowers or, some band
Black
like
Crowes
that
could do it.
The Black Crowes could do it. Yeah. Some band like that, like a rootsy rock band could, it sounds like that to me. So yeah, it doesn't, it's funny. It's the term rootsy rock is, I associate it with like the 90s, but it harkens back to an earlier time, but this sounds like it's a weird circular thing.
It's this song from the 70s sounds like a song from the 90s. It sounds from a song from the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's also true, but again, the sound production makes it sound a lot more modern.
Yeah, it's I think I associate the 70s with a lot of dry and like very, very little reverb.
It's like a room dryness, but it's not completely dry. And actually this has that sort of sound, but it's one of those sounds that when it's not paired with like other like instrumental sounds that speak very much of the 1970s, it still sounds very fresh in a lot of ways.
Well, when I think of 70s dry sound, I think of like a good example is Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Yeah. Where like I think they actually like they put towels on the drums and they tried to get the sound as they put as much absorptive material on the walls to try and that's the sound that I associate with the 70s. So, and I'm not saying like this doesn't have a ton of reverb on it, but you can hear the room tone. You can hear the studio. And that's a sound that I associate with sort of later on.
Yeah. It's interesting. The 70s, there was a lot of different studio sounds.
Well, then you think of like like Led Zeppelin and When the Levee Breaks and all the huge reverb on the drums on that song. It's like, but that's,
but it's not a gated reverb. It's a very, I mean, that's them recording in the stairwell of an old manor. Yeah. So.
Although they do have a delay on the drums. Yeah. That's a hotly debated thing, but I saw a video recently basically debunking the fact that all the Led Zeppelin fans are like, no, he didn't have a delay on the drums. And yeah, he did.
Yeah, I think there's a delay on the drums, but they got a much bigger sound by recording where they recorded it, but then added to make it even bigger. Because again, they're just trying to achieve a sound and they're using all the tricks they can. They're not trying to be as pure of, it can't be doctored at all. We're going to make sure that we record it in this one space and then never touch it again. That's not what they were going for. They were going for a certain sound, and they achieved part of that sound by using the stairwell. Yeah. And then the rest of it by putting the reverb on it. Yeah.
And that's part of that's what annoys me about people who don't know a lot about music production, is they think that if you can't like reproduce the studio exactly live, then it's not worth doing. And I agree to a certain extent, but there is a difference between playing live and making a record. And you can cut a record live, but your ultimate goal is to make the record sound as good as possible. And if you do things on the record that you can't necessarily do live, that's not a bad thing, because your goal is to make the record, and worry about the live stuff later. But maybe it's an arbitrary line to be drawn of, when auto-tune and things like that come in. So I don't really know.
I mean, even for things like that, I mean, I think, again, it's that know the rules before you break them.
Yeah.
Even if you are going to use those things, I would use them in an artistic way, not because the industry says that you have to make it as polished and clean and, quite frankly, sanitary as possible.
Yeah.
Like, they have it like hospital operating room sanitary, and it's just not human anymore.
It's clean and perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like things with a little bit of dirt kicked on them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you want to make it sound as good as possible, but you don't want it to be so perfect that it doesn't sound like humans.
Right.
You know? So I think that I guess what I'm saying is there's a balance.
Of course.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. As always, we get off on a tangent, but the next song is a happy, jolly tune called Withered and Died. Wow. That was a beautiful song.
Mm-hmm.
What's that band? Her voice sounds like the singer in that band. Another rootsy rock band from the 90s.
Are you thinking of the Cranberries?
No.
Because she kind of sounds like that too, but
10,000 Maniacs.
Oh, yes. She sounds way more like that. It's true. Yeah. I can really hear that. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's interesting. But I think they're also British. I think both those bands were from the UK.
They might be, yeah.
So I wouldn't be at all surprised if they were familiar with this record and were influenced by it.
Well,
although, you know, it's hard enough. I mean, I guess their voices sort of sound like that, but the singing style also helps.
Yeah. I mean, they're playing similar styles of music.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I was actually just reading as we were listening. This album, we were saying earlier that this album was big in England, but apparently it wasn't. It was panned by critics or ignored completely when it came out. I guess it's one of those things that became popular later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, they were saying that his first album was panned by critics and this one got acclaimed.
Well, I think this one got a little more attention.
Okay.
But it wasn't like a huge hit or anything like that.
Okay. Still decent. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's,
I can't say, I mean, listening to this thing, I've got nothing really bad to say about it. So, I mean, we're only 3 songs in, but still,
yeah,
that's still pretty strong.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong album.
Yeah. I think a lot, maybe, I don't know how popular folk was in England in the early 70s. Because in England, maybe more so it was in America, but in England, it seemed to be like hard rock and blues were the thing in the early 70s that everybody was paying attention to.
Yeah. But there's always other camps, though. I think there's always been a sort of a folk presence, and folk rock seems to be a natural progression of that.
Yeah.
And I know there were a lot of folk rock bands that came out of Great Britain and other and Scotland and Ireland and even places in Europe.
But I'm just thinking
North America.
Yeah. So. But I'm just thinking of bands who were getting press at the time and who were getting, promoted.
Yeah, it was more of an underground scene.
Yeah.
For the most part. But I have a hard time seeing it being panned.
Well, I don't think it was panned. I think it didn't say that it was panned by critics. It was just ignored. Like they didn't even bother.
A lot of great stuff has been ignored. Yeah. And it takes some time to get recognized.
Yeah.
But that I believe.
Yeah. Which is I mean, I understand it. I mean, it's impossible to know about everything. Yeah. But the
top 40 only has so much space. it only has space for 40 songs.
40 songs. Yeah, exactly.
At any given time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's way, way more stuff out there than that.
Yeah. But yeah, so far it's at least the first 3 songs I'm probably going to be adding to my rotation. So yeah, I'm really liking this album so far. So moving on to the next one, the next song is called "I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight," which is the title of the
track.
album.
Yeah.
So let's hear that one. Now, that song could have been a hit.
Yeah, that one sounds like they were aiming for a single for that one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded very more like it almost sounded like a glam rock song.
Yeah. With
it was still a little bit more on the folky side, and it had those, it had sort of like that brass band, like Salvation Army brass band sort of sound in the background, almost like, the Beatles had on Sgt. Pepper or something like that. Which was kind of a neat sort of blend in there, with a song that sounded like it could have been done by like T-Rex or something like that. It was very interesting. I like I thought it was this album is really it's living up to its hype. It's
interesting, and it's not, it's not something that's getting me like really excited right away, but it's one of those things where it's like I'm just kind of smiling at what's happening. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. I see what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like and that's kind of nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And each song is different than the last, but it still fits. Like every song isn't a repeat of the last one, but it still all makes sense within the context of the album. So that's hard to do. I mean, it's yes and no. I mean, it's a little bit easier to do when you think about if you've got like a group of musicians, and it's hard for those musicians not to sound like those musicians. So sometimes all they have to do is, play their stuff and then have a certain sound technician or style sort of help blend it all together, where you listen to a bunch of songs that weren't actually on an album, but you can tell that they were done during the same sessions. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing jarring really. No, exactly.
Between the songs. Yeah. And it's quite, like I said, this is just, it's living up to what people say. This is like, oh, this is a masterpiece. And these people that, I don't know who the hell they were. They're great though. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I can see why it's included on the list of albums you need to hear. So I'm curious to see what's going to come up to the next one. So the next one has an interesting title. It's Down Where the Drunkards Roll. So here we go. Oh, Rolling Drunkards.
Yeah. Yep. You can't have folk music without
rolling drunkards.
Yeah. So that song was kind of perfect. Interesting combo with the acoustic guitar and the Fender Rhodes.
There's also a dulcimer playing on there.
Yeah. And the way on the second pass in the chorus, when he was singing in that really low voice against her high voice, I thought that was a really cool counterpoint. They're just, and I can't think of anything more that the song needed. No.
It didn't need anything else. I was listening around to see how much stuff was actually in there, but they kept it very pared down. Yeah. It was very stripped down. I think it was just the 3 instruments plus the 2 voices.
Yeah. And
Yep.
even the two voices was on like one line. It was mostly
Really?
her voice. It
Yeah.
was, you know. Yeah, I mean, I can't. It's a minimal song, but it doesn't feel. It still feels full. Like it still feels.
Yeah.
Like the space is filled up. Like it doesn't feel like there's anything missing or there needs to be anything added on or anything like that.
Yeah. Space is filled up, but it's not busy filled up.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's hard to be busy with only with just what they've used, but yeah, it's it certainly didn't sound like it was lacking anything.
Yeah.
Which is it's really interesting. I mean, I guess that's a testament to the song, the writing of the song itself, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very well written song. I'm not sure which one of them wrote. Maybe they wrote it together, or if somebody else outside even wrote it. So I have no idea.
Well, I think all the tracks are credited to Richard Thompson. So I think he probably wrote it.
Okay, he's a good songwriter.
Yeah. I'm sure she helped, but he's the only credited writer, except.
Well, I think he probably wrote the song, brought it in.
Yeah,
and then they probably, tightened up any loose ends in the studio, as you do with things like this. But yeah, all right. No, it's good.
So I was just reading the credits, and the so you were talking earlier about the brass section on the previous song. And that's actually the, I guess it's the Manchester CWS Silver Band. So it's like the brass band of the city of Manchester.
Huh.
So that's kind of cool. They play on two of the songs, one on number 4 and number 7.
Okay.
So they actually play on the next song, which is a good segue. No, it's not this.
Not the next one. It's the one after that. But yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next one is called We Sing Hallelujah. So here we go. No resolve. Cool. I like it when songs don't have a resolve. They just
sort of end on a note that you don't even expect them to end on. Just, all right.
Yeah. That's another song I think could have been a hit or released as a single. It's a bit weird. It's a bit out there, but I think it could have in the time period. I think it could have been.
Yeah, I think it would definitely had a better chance in the time period. If it's not necessarily a hit, I could see it being a very popular song amongst folkies.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could see people playing this at like Summer Folk or something like that.
Yeah,
and people getting into it. It's just it has that real vibe to it. Yeah, it's a very folk song. It's almost like a Stan Rogers sort of thing.
Yeah. Especially the cadence and the way he's singing. It's very that sort of, I guess, almost Irish accent.
Almost.
Yeah.
It's not Irish. It's I guess it's that sort of sort of Manchester. I don't know. It seems like a Northern England sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's so many different you drive 10 miles in England and you're going to hear a different accent.
Yeah.
It's pretty, they're all British accents, but there's like unique, it's really strange. You don't get that sort of thing around here. There are definite regional accents in North America, but you got to go quite a ways before you're immersed in a different accent.
Yeah.
It's not that way in England. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah,
how little you have to travel to get to people who sound quite different than you. Sometimes
not even different towns. Sometimes it's different neighborhoods.
Yeah, exactly. different neighborhoods in London for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just different farming communities, different villages, whatever. They just seem to have their own accents. I'm no expert on which one is which, but
yeah,
I can definitely pick out different ones and say, oh yeah, that's that other one. I don't remember where it's from exactly, but yeah, that's a different one.
Yeah. 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 I was going to say something, but I can't remember what it is.
Was this something about accents?
I think so. Oh yeah. Actually, apparently, musicians are better at imitating accents than non-musicians.
I'll believe it.
Because I guess I don't know why.
Interesting. I think it's got something to do with like the performing arts in general.
Mm-hmm.
But then a lot of like you notice a lot of actors more than you realize are musically inclined as well. And comedians too. And they can throw an accent on them. Oh yeah, you think of like Bill Bailey and the guy's like talented up the wazoo. And he can do basically any dialect and can identify where they're from because again, he's from there.
I saw
but he's also an amazing musician.
Yeah. I saw Fred you know Fred Armisen?
Yes.
Yeah, I never used to like him, but he's grown on me. I saw him do a video of he had a huge map of the United States, and he was going around and explaining the different accents of different
that should
regions
be good.
of the U.S. It was really interesting.
And imitating them?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that'd probably be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember it's interesting because when I was a kid, we had friends that lived in the States, and we would go down and visit them, and they were in Michigan, but they also had more of a Southern accent, but they also had the Midwest kind of accent as well.
That's an interesting blend.
Yeah. It was interesting, and it's like that accent is unique to that area, and it's weird. It is a lot like England, where it's the United States definitely has different accents for different regions, but it's not as concentrated like it is in England.
Yeah.
But apparently musicians, and that gets like Fred Armisen is also a musician, and and apparently like musicians are better at imitating and picking out accents, and are better at doing impressions as well.
I can believe that.
So, yeah.
Well, it takes that ear.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got an ear for one, you can usually have the ear for the other.
Yeah.
It's just a certain way of listening that I guess the average person isn't necessarily, they're not trained to do that necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's get on to the next track, I guess.
Move on to the next one. Is called Has He Got a Friend for Me? Cool. She has a really good voice.
Yeah. I have heard that song before, not this version.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the song. I believe it's the same song. I think Maria McKee covered it.
Oh, okay.
So, and I was unaware it was a cover. It's a very good song.
It is. Okay, I forgot about her. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm beginning to think this album had a huge influence on the roots rock of the late 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's another artist that's really great, actually.
Yeah, it's funny. It's always, that's always the way it happens. It's artists get influenced by an unknown or little known band, and the artists that are influenced by that little known band are the ones that get the recognition.
But sometimes it helps boost the recognition of the original album and the original artist as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of hard for something to chart at that point because it's old at that point. It winds up getting passed around for people to say, "Oh, this is great. Here, listen to this."
Yeah.
And then it winds up being like a good seller, but it's not charting because there's new stuff that takes its place.
Right.
It's very rarely does something, 10, 20, 30 years old manage to chart, that posthumously.
Yeah. And it's the term gets thrown around a lot, but it's ahead of its time. And it's, it's like we were saying earlier, like this doesn't sound like it has a specific time period. I mean, it was recorded and released in 1973, but like you were saying, like it could have been put out yesterday and you wouldn't be able to really tell the difference unless you knew. So I'm trying to think about like what was going on at the time that this was released and trying to compare it to other things, but there isn't anything in that time period that you can really compare it to.
I can. There was I'm trying to think of other bands. Sometimes you could hear stuff like this in like Vendergraph Generator or which they were sort of a prog band, but there's a lot of prog rock, honestly, that was on the folkier side when you went digging into it. And the more obscure the band, sometimes the more likely you're going to come across like this folk rock sort of thing mixed in there.
Yeah.
Because again, these guys were just willing to throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. There's a lot more of that going on, especially in the early 70s and even the late 60s. I think this just came straight out of that. Yeah. But it was a little more, well, actually they experimented a little bit because there was that one track that was very glam, actually, that we talked about earlier. I think that's the crowd. I mean, he was with, what was it? Did you say Fairport Convention? Yeah. Yeah, that's that. Well, there you go. Yeah. He's right in that whole group there. So yeah, that's where he's coming from anyway.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But at the same time, they're kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
Not, I mean, you think of all of these songs, or most of these songs are under 4 minutes. You think of prog rock as being these 8-minute epics.
Yeah, but I mean, it's true. But not all of them were. You'd be surprised, man, when you start going into like some of the underground stuff and you get some of the acid rock. But amongst all that stuff, there's these folk rock gems and these prog rock things that you'd be surprised they don't really fall into the category. Again, like the 8-minute epic songs was getting towards when prog rock was starting to get a little bit bloated. Right. I mean, there was the odd song that could absolutely work that way, and even in the later stuff it could work that way. But I'm talking about on the early side of stuff when it was still, I mean, it was being experimental, but it wasn't experimental for the sake of being experimental. It was experimental for the sake of trying something new because it was actually kind of new and exciting. And there wasn't actually a pressure to do something different. In fact, it was kind of flying in the face of the pressure to do something the same as everybody else. Yeah.
So I guess this is in that spirit of, well, they're not, and the sales of the album reflect that. I mean, nobody was listening to this. So that makes sense. So we've got 3 songs left on the album. And so the next one is called The Little Beggar Girl. That was fun.
Yep.
I like that one.
Good lyrics in that one. I like that one.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I mean, I like the song and everything. I don't know. Like, there's nothing I would change. There's, everything fit together. I mean, it's just kind of perfect the way it is.
Yeah. It's just another really good folk track.
Yeah.
With a little bit of an electric kick behind it. It's kind of decent. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I like the melody too. The melody was really catchy.
Intricate too.
Intricate, yeah. Unusual, and I don't know what else to say. I really like that song. That might be my favorite so far, but I don't know. I don't know if it's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
On this one.
Yeah, it's I think we've only got the 2 songs left on this album.
The 2 songs, The End of the Rainbow and The Great Valerio.
Yeah. I think then we're going into bonus tracks.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Not really. I mean, it's good little folk song. I don't know to really specify anything else on that, but it's it's just kind of, I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it that we haven't already covered on the rest of the album, really. So
yeah. Okay, so the next song is called The End of the Rainbow. Here we go. Well, that was kind of a depressing song.
Yeah, it's that's the downer track, but that's okay. Every good folk album needs the kick in the teeth song.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tis a long folk tradition.
Yes.
It's much like country and the blues. They sort of have that too.
You gotta sing about a tragedy.
Yep.
Yep. I liked the electric guitar in there was doing some really interesting stuff. Not in your face and not overly complicated, but it just kind of helped move the song along.
Yep.
Whereas I think it would have been more somber if it was just an acoustic guitar playing. And I think it would have been more of a drag. But with the electric guitar in there, it was just kind of moving it along.
Yep.
And playing some really interesting lines.
What happens when you play a folk song backwards? You get the you get your girl back and you get the ship back, and it's just another take on the old country song. You get your dog back, your truck back. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Slightly different, but same kind of
same concept. Yeah. Yeah. You got to have some reality in there, I guess.
The melancholiness.
But if it's, see, that's the thing that I think some bands get too caught up in that, and that's all of their songs are that kind of down, depressing kind of thing.
Sometimes, yeah, which is a little unfortunate, but that usually is a reflection of kind of where their spirit is.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think, well, the one that comes to mind immediately to me is Joy Division, and he wound up committing suicide. So, that's, he was not a happy fellow.
No.
Which is sort of too bad because he was actually pretty talented. But yeah, his songs could be a little on the downer side.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Joy Division fan for that reason.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Joy Division fans. I know they're a band that a lot of people like, and I have respect for him. I can't get into him because of that. But no, it's and I think a lot of it. I don't know. Yeah, some bands some of it too is maybe an image thing as well. I'm not saying that about Joy Division. I'm saying that about other bands where it's like
sometimes,
they can kind of sell the melancholy.
Well, the emo genre kind of made an entire genre out of it.
Yeah. Not all the emo bands were.
No,
there was some interesting stuff going on there, but the more mainstream ones, I guess, were marketed that way. And they certainly weren't the first either, by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, goth kind of did it, and industrial did it, and there's actually quite a lot of stuff that was primarily known for its downer overtones. Yeah.
But then again, when you actually dig in a little bit deeper, it wasn't all necessarily that either. So
yeah,
but yeah, they weren't necessarily all about the happy rainbows and gumdrops and things like that.
No. Well, that's the other extreme too, and I can't stand music that's all that either.
No, it's true. That's like toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
yes. Yeah. I actually totally understand what that actually means when people said that. I'm like, yes, that's actually exactly what I mean by that. It's the people positivity that makes me want to kill people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm positive that I'm going to murder you.
Yes.
Anyway, on that happy note, we're on to the last track of the album, and it's called The Great Valerio. Cool ending.
Yeah, it's a good track to end on.
Yeah.
For this album.
Yeah. That track kind of surprised me a little bit with the chord progression, that little bit of dissonance.
Yeah.
It was kind of like switching back and forth between keys, I guess. That was interesting. Yeah.
And I love the intro with the sort of slightly janky sounding upright piano in the background, and the guitar started just doing that thumping thing. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a real it created quite a mood.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of the end of Sloan's One Chord to Another album a little bit. The way it kind of
what song is that? It's been a while since I've heard that album.
It's one of I think it's a Andrew Scott song, I think.
Let's see. 400 meters?
Maybe that's it.
Or are you thinking of the one on Twice Removed?
Maybe I'm thinking of the one on Twice Removed.
It's I think I know the one you're talking about. It's Before I Do.
Yeah, that might be it. I think that's it.
Yeah. Where it just it's kind of like She's So Heavy, where it just abruptly ends. Is that the one you're talking about?
Well, I'm thinking of the fade out, and with that upright piano sound, and it's
yes. No, you're right. That is 400 meters. Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I forgot about. Yeah.
I could only think of the original. I couldn't tie it to the rest of the song, so somehow 400 meters sounded wrong to me. But anyway. Yeah, that's just sort of the vibe I got of this one.
Yeah.
Again, like the two albums are nothing alike, really.
No.
But they have got, I would say they're both very high quality albums.
Yeah. Just different from each other.
Very different from each other. But I can see some parallels. There's both of them are not afraid to dig into doing different things and playing with chord progressions and I could sort of see a little bit of a thread between stuff like this and stuff that they do.
Mm-hmm.
That's just sort of what it reminded me a little bit of. I think this is a really cool song, and I love ending albums that seemed on notes like that. It's very cool.
Where it kind of drifts off.
It kind of drifts off in a little bit I don't know, it's almost unsettling, but it's not uncomfortably so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just sort of like, just sort of going further into the unknown.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. So it's a hard mood to put into words.
Yes. It is.
I know.
Like, I think it is sort of like a melancholy sort of thing. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pleasantly surprised with this album.
Yeah. This album, I don't think there's a dud on it anywhere.
No. Yeah. I mean, and like I said before, each song is unique. It doesn't sound like the last one, but it all fits together.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a great album. That's what great albums do. I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, a Beatles album or, you know, anything. I mean, that's the mark of a great album, is to make it all fit together. And they did it really well. I'm glad that they finally got the recognition they did, but it's a shame that they weren't recognized for it at the time. But I think they're still alive, so I'll have to check that. Richard Thompson is 72 and Linda Thompson is 74. So yeah, they're still around. So thankfully they, you know, stayed around to get the recognition that they deserved.
The album is, you know, pushing 50 years old. So yeah, which means they were in their 20s when this came out. So
yeah,
early 20s.
Yeah, they would have been. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, it's amazing to me when I hear, just not even music, but projects like, you know, Orson Welles was 25 when he did Citizen Kane.
Right.
Quentin Tarantino was 25 when he did Reservoir Dogs.
Good grief.
These people who are making masterpieces and they're barely in their adult years. It's like,
yes.
What? You know,
they're barely a decade out of high school. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people just have that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this album, I think, fits into that. Yeah. So I can't say enough good things about this album. I'm going to add it to my rotation of songs. And, yeah, I'm actually curious about some of their other stuff as well.
Yeah. So, it's worth looking into for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So if, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Oh,
we can wrap it up.
The only thing I can say is I was a little bit surprised to find a song on there that I actually recognized.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of neat. It's just like, oh, that's where that came from.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So highly recommend this album.
Yeah, this is a top-notch album. Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't heard it before, do.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, you can check us out on at polyphonicpress.com. You can drop us a line at polyphonicpress@gmail.com, and you can check us out on Instagram. And if you want to help out the show, you can do that by going to buymeacoffee.com/polyphonicpress. And that's about it. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
And I'm John Van Dyke.
Take it easy.